Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and on today's video, I want to give a great big thanks to great Big Pillock for helping me put the Friday episodes of Explained together for the last few months. So I think it's time for me to cover one of his favorite themes to express my gratitude. And to do so, we're going to go back to one of my favorite types of themes, TCG Exclusives. This time around, we're looking at one that debuted during the Sevens era. It has some pretty wild company. Mutants made a big splash with its fiendish control tactics. Bee Troopers are an absolute combo machine that gave insects some really tricky plays. Libromancers put a unique spin on ritual summoning with its incredible field spell and gnarly control loop. Goaty elevated MBT's infamous teaching the fish to synchro summon quote straight up to meme status, while having some heinous disruption at its disposal, and even Gold Pride is shaping up to be a fan favorite already by making some slick combos with Punk. But there's one TCG theme from the Sevens era that I've neglected to talk about in detail until now. And that's not just because Delilah holds me at gunpoint whenever I so much as mention them by name, though at this point I believe the desk bots have jettisoned every weapon off the orbital platform and have disabled the surveillance to the recording booth, so I think we're in the clear. So, with all of that taken care of, meet Warrocks. Debuting in the February 2021 core set Blazing Vortex, Warrocks had a rough start to say the least. TCG archetypes tend to be powerful, unique, or both. And at first, Warrocks didn't really have the right kit to fit into any of these categories. As a result, it was seen by most of the community as worthless pack filler. Admittedly, myself included. And despite its second wave of support in Lightning Overdrive making the deck significantly better, it's still treated with total animosity by most of the player base, with some even branding it as the worst deck ever made. But despite that, Warrocks do have their fans, and they're pretty enthusiastic. So do these Stone Age skirmishers hold more potential than meets the eye? In order to find out, let's size up our prehistoric ancestors, paint our battle tactics on the cave walls, then scout some other tribes for reinforcements. It's time to return to Caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! With Warrock. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So what's the deal with Warrock? Well, they're a series of Earth Warrior monsters with equal attack and defense, and they activate various effects whenever one of your Earth Warrior monsters battles. And this is usually accompanied by giving all your Warrock monsters a complimentary 200 attack boost until the end of your opponent's turn. Now, 200 attack per effect may seem like small potatoes, and when you've only got a couple of monsters on field that can hand out that buff, it can certainly seem that way. But if you can gather a whole tribe of them, these buffs can get out of hand really quickly. For example, a setup of 3 Warrock monsters with this effect results in a board-wide buff of 600 attack per monster, putting those monsters at an attack range of 2300 to 3300 by the end of your battle phase. Now, already these numbers definitely aren't worth turning your nose up at, but if your opponent proceeds to their own battle phase and triggers all of these effects again, your monsters can get anywhere from 2900 to 3900. And once again, that's just with 3, it scales exponentially the more we have. But with these effects requiring you to battle, well, Warrock kinda struggles to get its game plan off the ground quickly if your opponent makes you go first. Furthermore, people quickly figured out that they can deny Warrocks any ability to generate advantage by skipping their own battle phase altogether. And with how high their attack can climb, your opponent isn't exactly under any incentive not to do so. However, while you do miss out on your best effects when the battle phase is skipped, this does mean your opponent is giving up on the phase where they traditionally deal game-winning damage, so you're guaranteed another turn if your opponent does this, giving you another chance to crack their board. Alright, that's enough of a preamble, let's get into the monsters, starting with the level 4s. And these all have one effect in common, where if they're sent from the monster zone to the grave by your opponent's card effect, you can special summon one level 5 or higher Warrock monster from your hand or deck. Now, on the surface, this effect feels pretty lame, since it does require your opponent to trigger it. And while it would be preferable if this effect didn't care which player sent the monster, don't take this as a strictly bad thing, because no matter how your opponent gets rid of those monsters, there's gonna be repercussions for it. If it's done with the card effect, you'll float into a bigger monster so you don't lose any field presence. And if they run over that monster in battle, you'll almost certainly get some benefit from that battle, even if it doesn't go your way. So think of these effects as a way to incentivize your opponent into actually battling you, as opposed to some kind of design flaw. Warrock Forsha is a level 4 monster with 1700 attack and defense, and when your Earth Warrior monster battles after damage calculation, you can add one Warrock card from your deck to your hand except another copy of itself, then all Warrock monsters you control gain 200 attack until the end of your opponent's turn. Now, being able to search any card, and not just monsters, is excellent. But the fact that Forsha searches after a battle seems pretty bad at first glance, and normally, you'd be right. However, while Forsha is a little slower on the search than ideal, they come with their own benefits. Namely, because this effect activates after damage calculation, and hence, during the damage step, it prevents a huge amount of interaction from being used against it. The most important of these interactions being Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, because Ash negates the effect and not the activation. And quick damage step lesson, in the damage step you can only respond with effects that negate activation specifically, not effects that negate effects. Really weird and unintuitive, but it gets the job done. So while Forsha can still get checked by an activation negation like most counter traps, an Ash-proof searcher is no joke, especially in formats where that's very possible. Hint hint, Kashtira format, hint hint. And hey, even if it does get negated, it'll more often than not trigger Forsha's floating effect if that negation also destroys the monster as well, like Baronne de Fleur does. This means your goal is to keep Forsha on the board as long as you can get away with in order to grind out as much advantage as possible. So, while you're in the background cooking up your game plan, you can definitely count on your monster to hold down the Forsha. Warrock Gactos is a level 4 monster with 1900 attack and defense, and when you normal summon an Earth Warrior monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. This is a really neat extender for the theme, allowing you to access the rank 4 toolbox, as well as some excellent Warrior Link monsters that we'll be sure to go over later on. It even serves a similar purpose in other Earth Warrior decks like Heroics, Amazonas, and of course, full Goki combo. But that's ultimately all it does outside of its floating effect. Gactos is the only Warrock monster that doesn't give out any attack buffs at all. And since you want to be stacking up as many of those as possible, there is valid logic to running Gactos in smaller numbers in a dedicated Warrock deck. But Gactos does have a slightly more subtle application, and that's ensuring that your post-damage calculation effects actually go through. Let's wind things back to our previous monster. If Forsha would be destroyed by battle, they aren't actually sent to the grave until the end of the damage step, and their effect takes place after damage calculation, immediately before the end of the damage step. So, when it's destroyed, Forsha can resolve their effect one more time before dying. However, this does not happen if Forsha is the only Warrock monster you control, as they also buff all of your Warrock monsters when resolving that effect. And if Forsha was the last Warrock on your field before getting destroyed, you technically don't control any Warrocks at the end of damage calculation, and as such, you can't resolve the effect. So, Gactos is here to make sure that no Warrock monster has to die alone. And if this ruling befuddles you as much as it does me, then hey, join the club. Warrock Wento is a level 4 monster with 1800 attack and defense, and when your Earth Warrior monster battles an opponent's monster, as a quick effect, you can pay 800 life points during damage calculation to give your battling monster an 800 attack boost until the end of that turn. This is a great tool to help deal with big monsters your opponent puts up to block your attacks, because in spite of the not insignificant attack levels that even our low-level monsters can climb to, it doesn't change the fact that they already start pretty small. And Wento is here to give your monsters a great head start against such monsters, boosting Forsha all the way up to 2500 and Gactos to an impressive 27. Heck, Wento can even use that effect on themselves, putting that at 2600 before any more buffs kick in after damage calculation. Meaning it's a normal summon that can contest El Shaddoll Winda. I know, seems outlandish, but I don't make the rules here, folks. And those are just the small monsters I've mentioned. Once we get into our big beaters, nothing your opponent throws your way is gonna be safe from getting flattened. So once you use their effect to swing the battle in your favor, your opponent will wonder where their monsters Wento. Alright, that's all our level 4s, so let's move on to our level 5s. And while they do lack the floating effects and most of the utility of our level 4s, they make up for it with slightly bigger stats, plus a different effect that they all have in common, which is, if you control no monsters, or all monsters you control are warriors, you can normal summon them without tributing. And we love to see it, as tributing them would result in a no net gain in monsters, and hence, no advancement in our game plan, either through advantage or battle buffs. But since our deck is all warriors, losing steam is the least of our worries. Warrock Orpus is a level 5 monster with 2100 attack and defense, and when your Earth Warrior monster battles after damage calculation, you can send an Earth Warrior monster from your deck to the grave, except another copy of itself, then all Warrock monsters you control gain 200 attack until the end of the opponent's turn. Now, Orpus isn't quite as useful as Forsha, because while Warrocks do have some grave interaction, we don't exactly have it in spades. However, this does foolish any Earth Warrior, not just Warrocks, so you can definitely use it to throw some off-theme cards into the grave for later, or even use it in other Earth Warrior themes for the same purpose. And don't forget, Orpus's effect has the same wording as Forsha, so Orpus is also ash-proof. So feel free to dump whichever tools you want into the grave while your opponent is near powerless to stop you. And when your opponent realizes that, it's really gonna aura piss them off. Warrock Mahmood is a level 5 monster with 2000 attack and defense, and when your Earth Warrior monster battles after damage calculation, you can target one spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy it, then all Warrock monsters you control gain 200 attack until the end of the opponent's turn. Now, back row removal is not as prevalent in today's meta as it's been in previous formats, so having an MST attached to a battling effect seems like a bit of a waste. But Mahmood is stronger than they look, and not only because of how ripped they are, seriously, look at those biceps. It's because this effect also activates in the damage step, so there's a very strong possibility that your opponent won't be able to chain the back row that you target. You can't activate Imperm in response, you can't activate Ice Dragon's Prison in response. Heck, the only spells and traps capable of punishing this are counter traps, which at that point you're already trading a monster for them, so it's kinda doing that job anyway. And Altergeist Protocol, but we don't talk about Altergeist Protocol! Look, I was an early hater of Warrocks myself, to be honest. I never thought Warrocks would be ballin', but Mahmood is here to prove me wrong. Alright, time to wrap up our monster lineup with our bosses. And while they don't have any effects in common with one another, they do all share the same activation condition on one of their effects. Specifically, that effect can be activated at any point in the battle phase as a quick effect, provided that an Earth Warrior you control has already battled that turn. And since these effects all hand out buffs to all your Warrocks, those effects can be activated during the damage step, specifically before damage calculation, since those effects change attack points. So feel free to use this little piece of rules knowledge to force these effects through loads of interactions. Warrock Skylar is a level 6 monster with 2200 attack and defense, and they gain a constant 100 attack boost for every monster your opponent controls. This buff doesn't put in a lot of work most of the time, but it's nice to have. Sometimes, even a measly 100 attack bonus can make more of a difference than you think. But far more importantly is, during any battle phase in which your Earth Warrior monster has battled, as a quick effect, you can target a level 5 or lower warrior monster in your grave, special summon it. Also, all Warrock monsters you control gain 200 attack until the end of your opponent's turn, but you cannot attack directly with level 5 or lower monsters for the rest of that turn. See? There's that grave interaction I was talking about. Skylar is an incredible target for your level 4 floaters to land on when your opponent removes them with a card effect, as more often than not, you'll be able to use Skylar's quick effect to bring that floater right back once the battle phase kicks off. But generally speaking, they're a great option for leveraging your monsters that have been knocked out in previous turns, or sent to the grave with Orpus. For instance, you can bring back Forsha to get the advantage train rolling again, Wento to get a little extra oomph behind an attack, or Mahmood to deal with some back row. The fact that you can't attack directly with any low-level monsters afterwards does bite, but by sequencing your battle phase properly, it's not always a pressing issue, especially if you use it on your opponent's turn when you're not attacking anyway. It's also important to note that as long as the target is level 5 or lower, Skylar's effect can be used to bring back any warrior monster, not just a Warrock, not just an Earth Warrior, any warrior. This means that Skylar can bridge the gap between Warrock and any off-theme warrior support you can splash in. And believe me, we've got some dynamite options to go over later. They're a little bit hard to get onto the field on account of being level 6, but once you get past that, the Skylar's the limit to what you can pull off. Warrock Meteoragon is a level 7 monster with 2600 attack and defense, and they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Also, when an attack is declared involving this card and an opponent's monster, you can negate the effect of that opponent's monster this turn, as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of monsters with the same original name. And once per turn, during any battle phase where your Earth Warrior monster battled as a quick effect, you can make Meteoragon able to attack monsters twice this turn, and all Warrock monsters you control gain 200 attack until the end of your opponent's turn. I can't lie, this card is actually bonkers. Applying Crossout Designator's negation to everything that Meteoragon battles can seriously put your opponent on the back foot, especially if they're playing a deck that relies on floating effects, such as, let me grab something completely at random here, Burning Abyss. But this effect allows Meteoragon to contest way more than just floaters. It completely invalidates Grenmaju and Eater of Millions. If you can boost them with Wento, it can smash Shangri-Ira right out of the sky, and they can even throw fists with DPE. It can't be destroyed in response, and once they negate its effects, it's certainly not reborning itself. Seriously, even threatening to use this effect allows Meteoragon to single-handedly take down a fully loaded Appaloosa. And the immunity to effect destruction truly is the cherry on top, because it means that, shy of banishing, bouncing, or spinning, your opponent's gonna have to battle it in order to get Meteoragon off the board. And that's not even mentioning its quick effect that effectively allows you to blank the effects of 2 monsters in a single turn. Sure, they suffer the same problem as Skylar, insofar as the fact that they're harder to put on the field because of their higher level, but I think you'll find it worth it, as this card's effect is something a bit meatier. You hear that, Skylar? My mood's looking for something a little meatier. Warrock Basileos is a level 8 monster with 2700 attack and defense, and during any battle phase in which your Earth Warrior monster battled as a quick effect, you can make Basileos able to attack directly this turn, and all Warrock monsters you control gain 200 attack until the end of your opponent's turn. Also, when your Earth Warrior monster is destroyed by battle while Basileos is in your hand or grave, you can special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. Hey, look, a high-level monster with a built-in special summoning effect. That's new. And it's a great help that this effect happens to be on the biggest monster in the theme. 2700 is already a pretty threatening attack stat to be starting on, but it's easy enough to break 3000 with only a couple of Warrock boosts. But attack points aside, Basileos is incredibly versatile, jumping out of the grave or the hand to protect your life points in a pinch, or swinging right past your opponent's entire front line for a huge chunk of damage. And it's entirely possible to steal games this way. And hey, even if you do use Basileos' effect to enable the direct attack, there's nothing saying that you have to attack directly. So, if your opponent has a big chonker on board, which is a little too much for your smaller Warrocks to deal with, you can ram one of them into something, bring out Basileos from the hand or grave, then trigger their effect to reach 2900, and that's big enough to dispatch anything smaller than a Blue Eyes. Discounting Gizmek Okami, of course. But I still wish that Basileos wasn't the only high-leveled Warrock who can special summon themselves. Seriously, whoever made this design choice needs to get the axe. Okay, that's all of our Warrock monsters. Now it's time to move on to the spells and traps. And there's no better place to start than on Warrock Mountain, a field spell that, when activated, lets you add a Warrock monster from your deck to your hand. Side note, this was one of the more frustrating things about the archetype on first release. You could tell Warrocks were trying. They had the obligatory field spell that searches the monster, it just didn't get the rest of the way. Anyway, at the start of each battle phase, if you control no monsters, or all of your monsters are warriors, you can special summon a Warrock monster from your hand with a different name than all the monsters you control. And if your warrior monster would be destroyed by battle, you can send Mountain to the grave instead. There's no doubt about it, this card is the crux of the strategy. Searching a Warrock on activation is already great, I don't need to explain that. But once you commence the battle phase, it'll mobilize your higher leveled Warrocks from the hand in the blink of an eye. No awkward tribute summoning required. This would already be good enough, but it also helps your monsters stick around for a bit longer when they're about to get knocked out. This also helps you maintain your field presence turn after turn, and as such, ramp more and more attack power and advantage. Furthermore, if Portia, Orpus, or Mahmood end up all alone, Mountain enables them to stick around for one more battle, guaranteeing you'll get their post-damage calculation effects. Since this card is responsible for the vast majority of your field presence and getting the ball rolling on your game plan, your goal is to see it as quickly as possible, whether it's through terraforming, Force's Search Effect, or another card that we'll get into shortly. And it's during times like this that I'm especially grateful for Force's Ash immunity, because while Warrock isn't exactly lost without Mountain, not seeing it is very unpleasant. And believe me, the repercussions of that are one mountain we definitely don't want to climb. Warrock Dignity is a quick play spell card that can only be activated if you control a Warrock monster, and it has you activating one of two effects. Either when a monster your opponent controls activates its effect, you can negate that effect, or during the battle phase, when your opponent activates a spell or trap card or a monster effect, you can negate that effect. Now this is some spell and trap support I can get behind. Being an Omni-Negate is already enough to make even the most stubborn of naysayers turn their head a bit, but the fact that it's on a quick play spell is extraordinary. If you search this card out with Forcia, it's ready to use at a moment's notice without the need to set it first, even if you're in the middle of the battle phase. And even if you can only negate an on-field monster effect when not in the battle phase, the fact that you even have the option to use it another time in a theme that's so obsessed with battling really is something special. It doesn't destroy the card it negates, which does hurt a bit, but hey, a single negate can snuff out an entire game plan if timed right. And there's a bit of an ironic twist to this card. Remember how I said that Ash can't be used in the damage step since it negates the effect and not the activation? Well, this card has the same problem. And since so much of the archetype takes full advantage of the damage step, this feels like a major oversight. It might have cost the designers a lot of their dignity. Warrock Spirit is a quick play spell card that can only be activated during the battle phase. You target one Warrock monster in your grave, then apply one of two effects. Either special summon it in attack position, and for the rest of this turn its effects are negated and it can't attack directly, or special summon it in defense position, and the first time that each Warrock monster you control would be destroyed by battle this turn, it is not. So now, instead of an Omni-Negate, we have a Monster Reborn for the theme, and oh boy does it deliver. All of the same praises I sang with Dignity apply here as well. Being a quick play spell means it's immediately ready for use after searching it with Forcia, but there's much more to Spirit than just a simple Monster Reborn. Summoning in attack position is good if you need to grab some of the higher leveled Warrocks in your grave that Skylar can't reach in order to perform some big attack swings, though, reminder, not directly. But summoning in defense position is where it's at. While it's good enough using it on your own turn for building up your field presence, using it on your opponent's turn is incredible for survivability. Because if you summon Forcia with this, you can block a total of 4 attacks. You use Spirit to bring back Forcia, they'll survive the first battle, searching out Basileos after damage calculation. They'll get destroyed on the second battle, allowing you to summon Basileos, and if your opponent even has anything big enough to swing over Basileos at this point, it can tank a third battle, then get destroyed on the fourth. And that's not even accounting for any other Warrocks you may have already had on board, which can block even more attacks. It does suck a bit that we can only use Spirit in the battle phase, but hey, we're Warrocks! That's kind of our jam. And I have to say, I love the protective older sister vibes that Skylar gives off in this card art. It really captures the spirit of the archetype. Warrock Ordeal is a continuous spell card that you can only control one copy of. When activated, you place 3 counters on it, and when your Warrock monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, you can remove a counter to draw a card. And when the last counter is removed by this effect, you send Ordeal to the grave. This is a mixed bag at best. Sure, the fact that you can draw up to 3 cards in a single turn is really sweet, but oddly enough, this is a rare case where drawing lots of cards isn't actually that helpful, since Warrocks don't mobilize many cards at a time. And the fact remains that your opponent needs 3 monsters for you to run over to make drawing 3 cards even happen. Not to mention that since battling is involved, it's absolutely useless if you open with it going first. And if Warrock is going first, trust me, you're struggling enough as it is. You're also not really incentivized to search this card with Forcia, since you can't activate it during the battle phase like with your quick plays. Like, imagine if this had some kind of extra effect on there, where you could just activate it if it was searched by a Warrock during the battle phase. Like, how cool would that be? While I wouldn't go so far as to call it terrible, it's certainly quite an ordeal to resolve fully. Warrock Medium is a continuous spell card, and if you control a level 7 or higher Warrock monster, which at this point is just Meteoragon or Basileos, funny how card art tells you how to play the card, and your opponent controls a special summoned monster, neither player can activate monster effects on the field during main phase 1. And during the main phase, it allows you to set a Warrock spell or trap card directly from your deck, except a copy of itself. But you can't special summon monsters except warrior monsters for the rest of the turn. That's right, Warrock has its own floodgate. But it's not just a floodgate made with the sole purpose of draining as much fun from the game as possible, it's a floodgate that gives you access to your entire spell and trap card lineup on demand. It gets Mountain to get your board building started, Dignity if you suspect your opponent's going to try and go off on their next turn, Spirit for rebuilding your board or keeping you in the game. Heck, it even makes Ordeal worth considering, as you can grab it from your deck whenever your opponent has enough monsters for you to smash. And while this is tipping my hand a little early, it can even set our trap cards from the deck. And in a go second deck like Warrocks, those are even slower than usual, so getting them ready on demand is much appreciated. As for the floodgate effect, good God, if there was ever a way to entice your opponent more into actually using their battle phase than this, I don't know it. Though it's admittedly a little hard to establish the medium lock in as timely a manner as would be ideal. Because while getting Meteoragon and Basileos into your hand is easy, fielding them outside the battle phase is hard. So you're most likely going to have to wait until at least turn 3 before the lock actually kicks in. But a lot of the time, this is worth the wait. While the effect lock barely affects us, since all of our monster effects are battle phase reliant, many other decks are hopelessly lost without their on-field effects, and this will force them into the battle phase without so much as a second thought. Sure, they don't actually have to attack, they can skip straight to main phase 2 and proceed as normal, but again, you're practically guaranteed another turn if they do this, meaning more opportunities to gather more monsters, usually without fear of getting interrupted before you make it to the battle phase. And because they'll actually be starting the battle phase, Mountain can deploy another monster from your hand in the process. This card is absolutely absurd, and I think it's safe to say that it brought Warrock from an easy deck to beat to a medium level threat. Warrock Big Blow is a normal trap card that can only be activated during the main phase, a phrase that I thought would be anathema to Warrock, but here we are. And if a Warrock monster you control leaves the field thanks to your opponent's card effect, you destroy 2 cards your opponent controls. And this doesn't target, so anything with targeting protection's gonna get a nasty surprise on resolution. Back when this card was revealed, the general consensus was that this card Big Blows. It was easily the worst card in the archetype next to Ordeal, and arguably still is. As I previously mentioned, trap cards are even slower than normal in go second decks, but nothing more than situational removal on a trap card is asking for way too much, no matter what deck it's being played in. And while Big Blow does a great job at punishing opponents that tiptoe around giving you advantage by trying to clear your board outside the battle phase, it depends entirely on your opponent trying to do exactly that. As such, the much more flexible disruptive option to search with Forsha is always going to be Dignity. However, thanks in no small part to Warrock Medium, Big Blow has now become at least an option for your side deck. If you're up against a deck that plays a lot of monster removal, or even if they make you go first, you can now set this straight from the deck as a contingency plan. And once your opponent trips it, it's going to be a big blow to their ego. Warrock Generations is a normal trap card that can only be activated during the battle phase if your opponent controls more monsters than you do. When activated, you special summon a Warrock monster from your deck, and if you activated this card during your opponent's turn, as long as that monster remains face up on the field during that turn, your opponent cannot declare an attack except to attack that monster. While Big Blow suffers from only being useful in specific scenarios, Generations is actually a decently competent trap card for a deck like Warrock. After all, summoning from the deck has never been considered bad. And bonus, this can also shut down your opponent's battle phase at the drop of a hat, depending on what you summon. Especially Meteoragon, because let's be honest, who in the world wants to willingly slam their monster into that? It does, however, lose a lot of its utility during the late game once your board has been established, thanks to it wanting your opponent's monsters to outnumber yours. But hey, resolving it can accomplish anything from swinging the board state in your favor to generating loads of advantage. Alright, that's all the Warrock cards, but what do we do with them? Well, despite the fact that nearly all of our effects are geared towards the battle phase, we don't throw monsters out fast enough to OTK, and big monsters can be pretty problematic for us. Basically, we've got Gladiator Beast problems. So while this does sound outlandish for being a battle-focused deck, aggro's off the table. And while Medium and Dignity are some great control options, that isn't enough to class Warrock as a control deck either. This is the core problem with Warrock, as it doesn't seem to fit any particular playstyle. But that's just the thing. Warrock has a playstyle all its own. With Meteoragon's immunity to effect destruction, the one-time battle protection effect of Warrock Mountain, and the floating effects of Forsha, Wento, and Gakdos, Warrock's greatest strength is maintaining its field presence through just about anything. Other than a Zeus board wipe, it's the kind of card we have to spend a Dignity on. So we'll be running a defensive tempo building strategy. We'll establish the medium lock ASAP, anchoring it with Meteoragon since it's hard to get rid of without attacking, use Forsha and the second effective medium to keep our card advantage flowing, and steadily building up our field until we can reach a sufficient board state to overwhelm our opponent. But what can we play to help them out? Well, starting out with the obvious, Rhoda and Terraforming are not optional, as we need to see Forsha and Mountain as early as possible. Other than that, Warrock has a surprising amount of space that we can use for tech picks. Now, as a blind going second deck, you may be tempted to cram in as many hand traps as you can fit, but I think it plays much nicer with board breakers. Lightning Storm and Raigeki will work wonders here, and while Dark Ruler No More does prevent your opponent from taking damage, all of your effects only care about battling itself, not inflicting damage. And since OTKing isn't going to be happening anytime soon, go wild. However, I actually can't recommend evenly matched, since that requires you to give up your battle phase to play it from your hand, and that's the last thing we want to do. One of Warrock's weaknesses is its struggle to out monsters with high attack without Wento's help, so low attack kaijus like Gameciel and Kumungus really pull their weight here. Not only do they cleanly out a troublesome monster, but they also act as smaller targets for your monsters to scrap with. You can even pair them up with Alpha, Master of Beasts, who can kick a threatening monster out of your way by itself, or even bounce a kaiju back into your hand to use it again. And bonus, that gets Alpha, the decidedly not a warrior monster, off the board so it doesn't interfere with Mountain's summoning effect. But if you want to be a little less elegant about getting rid of big monsters, then look no further than Rookie Warrior Lady. Not only do they act as a Dark Honest for all warrior monsters, but you can banish them from your grave to retrieve one of your fallen Earth warriors, including another copy of Rookie Warrior Lady. Not to mention that their Dark Honest effect can even be used on the field, so you can throw Rookie into the grave with Orpus, then bring them back with Skylar to use the Dark Honest effect that way. And as long as Skylar remains on the field, you can keep bringing Rookie back every turn. Honestly, it's like this card was tailor-made for Warrock. Traditional floodgates are a little tricky to work with here since we want to be going second, so it's likely that the chance to use them to cut off your opponent's starting play will pass you by before you can even set them. But if you still want to run some for later turns, Rivalry and Gozen are great choices since we're a monotype and attribute deck. And because we usually summon twice per turn at most, summon limit does practically nothing to us, while making your opponent pop a blood vessel. But if you're feeling particularly toxic, Terminal World is pure evil in this deck. Once you establish the medium lock, your opponent's main phase 1 is more or less completely invalidated. And normally they'd be forced to skip to main phase 2 via the battle phase to get around this, but under Terminal World, there is no main phase 2. So essentially, your opponent goes from no monster effects in main phase 1 to no monster effects in any main phase, which I'm pretty sure upgrades that to a war crime deck in some territories. Your extra deck doesn't play a vital role in Warrock's game plan, so Pot of Prosperity or Extravagance, so pick your poison, certainly won't go amiss here. But if you want to experiment with your extra deck, Gakdos opens up a lot of plays as the Archetypes extender. Generally, we want to stick to Warriors since they won't get in the way of Mountain or get locked out by Medium, and we have a plethora of fantastic options to choose from. Isolde can search for either another Warrock for you to deploy with Mountain on the following turn, or Rookie Warrior Lady to ensure that you survive your opponent's battle phase. Ferocious Flame Swordsman gives your entire field a huge buff and floats into a warrior in your grave when it dies. And Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos becomes a nearly insurmountable wall if you fold Meteoragon or Basileos into it, bolstering your defensive line even more. all while also being an Earth Warrior, might I add. But why stop at Link monsters when Gyaktos gives us access to pretty much the entire Rank 4 toolbox? And in terms of warrior monsters, we have some real gems here as well. The Utopia package, Heroic Champions Excalibur and Gandiva, Blade Armor Ninja, Zubaba General, Gagaga Samurai, heck, even Gagaga Cowboy is right at home here. As not only is his attack position effect battle-oriented, he's also an Earth Warrior, meaning that he'll trigger your War Rock effects. And besides, are you really gonna tell me that cowboying for game in 2023 isn't the funniest thing ever? But if Fusion is your extra deck mechanic of choice, try Kaiki the Unity Star. Now, admittedly, this is a little tricky to set up. After all, Orpus can't send it to grave since Kaiki is a light warrior, not an earth warrior, but Kaiza the Hidden Star, who is an earth warrior, can sort that out for you. And they're easy enough to slam onto the board by attributing a spare War Rock or by tutoring it out of your deck with the Orpus and Skylar combo. And once you get Kaiki into the grave, it can enable some devastating plays. All of your War Rocks are gaining attack buffs after pretty much every battle, meaning that Kaiki's quick effect to summon itself from the grave during your opponent's turn is always going to be live. And once you reach that point, you can fuse into Idaten to grab Mahmood or Orpus from the deck and zero out whatever battles it. Then, on your next turn, you can use Skylar's effect to summon Kaiki back out of the grave, fuse into Shura, and zero out your opponent's entire board to close the game out. Or, if you're somehow lacking a level 5 or higher monster, you can instead go into Raijin the Breakbolt Star, which can float into 2 warriors in grave during the end phase after it dies, meaning you can set it up all over again. As for a silly tech pick, give All Out Attacks a shot. As we've mentioned previously, your opponent's ability to willfully skip the battle phase to not deal with any of your big monsters denies you advantage. But with all-out attacks, if your opponent special summons in any capacity, then they're gonna have to attack you against their will. So you can just sit on a board with Forsha and Meteoragon and watch your opponent punch themselves in the face all day while you reap the benefits. But if you want to get completely unhinged with this tactic, try out Yang Zing Unleashed. Not for Yang Zing shenanigans, of course, Worms and Warriors don't exactly play nice together, but the first effect is essentially all-out attacks on steroids. Not only can it also affect normal summoned monsters too, but it only affects your opponent. So you're free to play tactically while your opponent is forced to march all of their monsters into your board. And while Unleashed can be played around by summoning everything in defense position, hey, that usually means it'll be easier for you to run over their monsters during your turn. Plus, if Denglong ever comes off the ban list, Yang Zing Unleashed even becomes searchable if you can find a way to sync for it. I'm sure there's some level 1 Earth Warrior tuner monster that would love to help with that. Oh, can we also get some Fs in chat for the Dong Lord, by the way? And that's all I have to say about War Rocks. In spite of a bad first impression, they've got some really cool quirks that you'll be hard-pressed to find anywhere else in the game. And they're more than capable of claiming the upper hand against decks that aren't designed with battling in mind. Yet, despite this, they're still the target of relentless hostility from the community. Sure, they may not be the best in terms of TCG exclusive archetypes, or archetypes in general, but to be honest, I think this hostility is completely unwarranted. While a battle-focused archetype in this day and age is a difficult thing to justify, playing against one forces you to reassess how you play the game, and War Rock absolutely knocks this out of the park. After all, you never realize how important the battle phase actually is until you play against a deck that makes it matter. War Rocks may not seem threatening on the surface, but underestimating them will be your undoing, because in the hands of the right player, they can reach far higher than their reputation would ever suggest, and absolutely rock your socks off. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are War Rocks a page right out of history, or are they stuck in the Stone Age? And if you made it this far, what's your favorite War Rock card? Me, I'm gonna say Gyaktos. I like me a good rank 4 extender, and they've got a lot of goblin energy in there. I really vibe with that. And while you're down there, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so we can get to that 50k Akiza Explained milestone special. We're right there, we're so close. And share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. When you want to protect your cards with the power of dragon scales, get some sweet lore for them, and support the channel, check out my link in the description to get started. This video was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Green Knight, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Cameron Berg, Chibi Gohan,
Colin Todd,
Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Ironic, Iskander711,
Jester Designs,
John Manji,
Jordan,
Julius Sneezer, Mana Charge, Marluxia Zagirl, Meteornus, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Rem T Bright, RJ the Jank Monarch, Ruxith Sarani, Sammy Haim,
Salen Lucius,
Sophie, apparently, the Charizard Flame, the Fresh Prince of Conair, the Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Ariel Kersey, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Chris Kessler, Corbinisms, Danny Bound, Drachenwald, Emony, Eva Padilla, Gatorade, H2O, Gatorade, H2O,
Johnny sucks. He really sucks.
Haro, Herbal D, Jesus Garcia, Kale the Dragon, Carp, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Nitromo, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Superpurd, the legendary Raven and Tucker Ordorn, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people. So if you'd like to help support the channel, get your name in these credits, and get my videos earlier than anyone else, make sure to check out my link down in the description for my Patreon to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to see another Earth Warrior theme that'll play nice with this deck, at the risk of invoking Delilah's ire, check out this video I made on Amazonas. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.